So far, what we've covered is the basics of building a firewall. We look at zones and look at policy. So they're the foundations for our firewalls. However, our firewalls can protect us against a range of threats as well. So, being a perimeter device, being a device that separates us from the outside world, a good firewall can help us or can protect us from a range of other threats as well. So what we're going to take a look at is a thing called screen options, which essentially is designed to protect us from additional threats to our enterprise. So what we're going to do, we're going to take a look at what this is, what are these screen options, and the types of attacks that these what we call screen options can prevent or detect and prevent. Look at the advantages of that and look at how we might configure these options to block attacks. What we're talking about now is hacking. I'm talking about malicious activity directed against our organisation, and this is deliberate malicious activity directed against an organisation. I'm going to take a look at some of these things, and we're going to take a look at these particular configuration options that can help to defend us against these particular attacks. So the first concept of just more broadly of security, the first concept is that we have multi-layer protection in our network. So look at where the threats may potentially come from. Well, we've got certainly the external threats, which may be coming from anything that's connected to the internet, potentially is a threat. Obviously, the internet being a public network with everything on it and everyone on it is already a threat. So they are potential threats. We've got the types of threats out there, maybe a compromised PC. So if one of our telecommuters or a regional office or somebody has got a compromised PC that may have been hacked and they are allowed to connect into our internal network, we can have potentially a hacking attack coming through that. We can have somebody just out on the internet, just looking at our IP address, trying to hack us, trying to log in to us. That is so common, by the way, so common. If I was to, in fact, I had an experience one time where I accidentally left SSH as a inbound service in my untrust zone. I just left it open. Just SSH protocol was accepted. I shouldn't have. But within a couple of days, I've noticed, went into my systems log, and I found, I don't know, would have there been 10, 20, 30, 40 attempts for someone from an IP address, external. This IP hasn't happened when it was in China somewhere. It just happened to be there, but it could have been anywhere. But anyway, I was just trying to hack in and log into my device. So they must have been out there scanning around to try and see if this protocol was going to be accepted, and when they found it was accepted, they tried to log in. Now, of course, they didn't know the username and password, so they couldn't log in. But there were multiple attempts to log in. So when I discovered it, I just sort of took that protocol out of the allowable protocols in that zone. But it's so common. I mean, this is, you think, well, does this happen? This constantly happens. It constantly happens. I actually run a log on our domain. We run a VPS where we host our servers and so on. I run a log on that to see if we're being hacked. And in the course of a week, I will probably get about 500 reports on us attempting to be hacked in the course of a week. This is our domain. This is the acit.edu.au domain, our website, our mail servers, our alerting portals, all of this sitting there, hosted with, without a doubt, at least 500 attempts in a week to be hacked. I could probably go and open it up right now and open up the latest report, and I can almost guarantee that we have been tried to be hacked today, if not many, many times already today on that server. So there are people constantly out there looking to hack into, have systems running that try and hack into various accounts. Trying to find information, trying to look for ways to get into your network. It is constant. And then we look at some of these different types of activities that go on. Some of the things that can happen, you've got compromised PCs, U-turn attacks, hijacked remote sessions, there's caused some worms, viruses, Trojan attacks. Even within the network itself, you can have unauthorized wireless LAN users. Someone that connects to your wireless network, who is unauthorized to connect to your wireless network. I was talking to one of the network admins at the Gold Coast City Council, and they said they have this where people somehow manage to connect to the network unauthorized. They just find there's a connection on their network, on their wireless network. He says they've got their system set up so that if they get a single unauthorized connection, they can go to the exact point on the property where that connection is and find the person. So they've got their wireless network configured, they'll just go right there. But unauthorized wireless users is an issue. There's a whole range of different attacks. We'll look at some of these, but the solution really is to have layers of defense. Of course, we've already talked about our firewall, our zones, our policies to say what is and is not allowed in. That's one layer of defense. These screen options we're going to look at. This is another layer of defense that we can put in place. So there's various layers that we can put in place. Points of vulnerability. The remote access coming in from a telecommuter or a regional office. Site to site is a site to site vulnerability. The telecommuter will connect periodically, so I'll have a temporary connection. That's one vulnerability. The site to site will have a permanent connection, which creates another type of vulnerability. You may have business partners who are able to log in or are given access into our networks. We don't know whether their systems are hacked or not, or what's going on with their systems. So they could be introducing problems in. We have got internal users, employees that may have a problem with the company and can create problems in our data and our networks. Okay, so we have within our Juniper SRX, the operating system that runs on these devices provides these things called screen options, which are detection and prevention mechanisms for a range of different attacks. So we can apply these when we enable them. We're able to apply to traffic engineering a general security device, so it actually operates on the device itself, checks traffic prior to processing, resulting in fewer resources for malicious packet processing. So the screen options appears right at the beginning of our flow module. So we're looking at the incoming traffic for certain characteristics. If incoming traffic has these characteristics, we're going to drop it straight away. Okay, so we can configure our device to look for these characteristics and drop traffic that has these characteristics. And these characteristics that we're talking about are typical signs that hacking is taking place. So we'll look at some of these things. Okay, stages and types of attack. So there's a few things that happen when an attack is going on, one of the first things is that there is this reconnaissance phase where the attacker wants to gather information about the network. They're trying to sort out maybe what kind of devices that you've got operating there, what are maybe the IP addresses of those devices that you've got behind your firewall. They may want to know, as I said, the operating system types, because different operating systems have different vulnerabilities that can be exploited. What ports are open? So what protocols am I using within my organization? Some of these things are really easy to find. You don't need to be too smart. You can just monitor traffic that's coming out of your public IP address, and you can see what kind of protocols are being used within that traffic. So sometimes it's really easy. One of the biggest problems is that you can have a situation where a user internal to your organization can receive an email, open up a link and let a virus in, because that traffic is allowed through the firewall. So once you can have with a compromised computer or device inside your network that a hacker can then use to investigate the rest of your network and find out more information about your network. So these attacks can come externally, but they can also be coming internally from inside your network as well, looking for this information. This is why it's really, really important when you're planning your security design to put your valuable assets, to keep them into a security zone where you can hopefully protect them even from internal type attacks. Okay, so there is the reconnaissance phase. Then there's the exploit phase where you launch the attack, seal the origin of the attack, and remove and hide the evidence of the attack. And the propagation phase where once you're in, you then use that trust relationship with other back-end devices to take over the devices, create a tunnel back to the attacker to control the target network. So you get in, you do your reconnaissance, get in. Once you're in, you then use that to expand your control and influence around the network. Okay, so this is the reconnaissance phase. So every phase can be detected, and every phase can be prevented, in actual fact. So what happens in the reconnaissance phase is things like IP address sweeping. What that means is you will get a whole bunch of pings. So you'll get one source address sending ICMP messages or pings to a whole range of IP addresses. It'll just scan, it just ping the entire spectrum of addresses, hoping that there'll be a response from an address somewhere. And if it gets a response, it says, well, now I've got a live system here. Now I know on that IP address there is actually a device, something there that can be potentially attacked. So the first thing is, let's build a map of the target and find out what IP addresses have got some device, something that's responding to a ping on there. Then there's port scanning. Now with port scanning is where we've got an IP address, so we found an IP address, we know we've got a long IP address. Let's now scan that IP address for ports that may be open. Let's send traffic to a whole range of different ports. Let's try FTP, let's try TFTP, let's try SMTP, let's try all these different ports that may be open. Let's try HTTP, let's try HTTP. Let's find all these ports to see, are we getting any ports that are open here? What potentially might this device be doing? What protocols may it be using? Is it a web server? Is it a mail server? What is it? Let's just scan. So that's port scanning. And this is all part of this this reconnaissance phase. So these are things that we can prevent or detect and then prevent using these screen options. IP options in the IPv4 header, there is a field. It's called the options field. It's really never used. In actual fact, it's unnecessary. You don't need to use it for normal traffic. However, hackers can use it to put things in there that create a response, or that create a problem, or that allow them the ability to either avoid detection themselves, so hide their own identity whilst getting into the network. Operating system probes. An operating system probe is when you send a packet into the network that has got a particular configuration, usually a misconfiguration, usually a malformed packet, and then different operating systems respond in different ways to those packets. So if I've got a Linux operating system and I send a malformed packet in, it'll respond in one way. If I've got a Windows operating system, it might respond differently to that same packet. So it gives the attacker some information about what operating system do I have. If I know that I've got a Windows server, then I know that perhaps that server will respond in a certain way to a certain attack. So it just provides them with more information. Then there's the evasion technique. So when an attacker is performing this reconnaissance, they want to hide their own identity. So they will often use spoofing to when they're performing this attack. They will use spoofing. You know what spoofing is? Spoofing, you know that term? Spoofing. Okay, spoofing is when you change the source address on the packet header, so that the packet appears to be coming from a different address to what it is actually coming from. Okay, so when the packet arrives, the source address is not the real source address. It's a different source address. So it looks like it's coming from somewhere else. What spoofing can also do is the source address can be an address which is inside the organisation, so it can become an internal address. So the packet may look like it's coming from inside. Therefore, it may avoid a firewall policy or a check that prevents packets coming from the outside to that particular destination address, but maybe would allow packets from the inside to that particular destination address. So if you can make a packet appear like it's coming from inside, it's likely to be allowed by a security policy, where if it's obvious that it's coming from outside, it's likely to be denied by a security policy. So spoofing has a number of different purposes. One of them is to kind of pretend that it's an internal packet when it's an external packet. The other is just to avoid the true identity of the attacker. So they just hide themselves by putting a bogus source address onto packets. And we can detect that as well. We can detect spoofing. Okay, detect spoofing. So all of these different things, which are deliberate actions of hackers, we can detect them and we can prevent them using these screen options. Let's talk about some of the attacks. So we've talked about the reconnaissance phase. Let's talk about the attack phase. Forms of DOS. Who knows what DOS is, by the way? Heard that term before? The DOS attack stands for denial of service. Okay, denial of service. So the goal of a DOS attack is to overwhelm the target with traffic, so that the target becomes incapable of functioning and performing its job as a network device or as part of a fully functioning network, so that the attacked traffic overwhelms the device so that genuine traffic cannot get through. That's the goal of a DOS attack. They can be very successful. I've heard of businesses that have totally gone out of business because of a DOS attack. being launched against them. So forms of DOS attacks is a range of them, but router and firewall DOS attacks include session table floods. So what does that mean? Well, in our firewall device, whenever we have a new connection, we create an outgoing flow, right, and an incoming flow. Those two flows will create a session. That session is recorded in the session table. Well, the session table has a finite amount of memory that it can use to populate that table with sessions. It's possible to fill it up. If it gets filled up, guess what? We can't create any new sessions. So we can't initiate any new connections. So really no more traffic can get through our firewall if our session table is totally full. So the purpose of this type of attack is to just hit your firewall with so much bogus traffic that it fills up the session table and no genuine traffic can get through. So that's a session table flood. The other is a sync act proxy flood, which essentially it never creates a session. It actually never creates a session, but what it does, it initiates a session which is never properly formed. So the device is sitting there in limbo waiting for the TCP/IP session to form, and it never actually forms. So you end up overloading the device with this about to be formed session that never actually formed. You keep getting up with all of these partly formed sessions, and you overload your firewall. Then there's the network DOS attacks. There are things called sync floods, sync cookies, ICMP floods, UDP floods, and LAN attacks. We'll get in and look at those as to what they actually are. And then there's particular device attacks, like examples, ping of death. There's certain operating systems that are vulnerable to a particular malformed ping and malformed packets. Teardrop, again, it's just a malformed packet, and so is a WinNuke. So these are just some examples. I mean, none of these things are static. These things keep on changing. There's always new things coming along. So these are just some examples of types of attacks. Okay, so suspicious packets. So how do we tell if something is not right, that we may be getting hacked? Well, ICMP anomalies, which means what if I get a ping? See, a ping is actually quite a small packet. Right, there's nothing in it. It's just an ICMP message. That's it. IP packets can be actually quite big because they usually contain data. What if I get a really big ping? Okay, something's wrong there, right? Is it possible to make a big ping? Yes. Okay, it's possible, but it's probably not legitimate. So there's kind of things that you look at and think, well, that's not right. How do we know if these things are happening? This is what screen options do. They evaluate the traffic to say, okay, let's look at this traffic. Does it match certain criteria? Is there something odd about it? And we can look at certain things. Bad IP options. So we look in the IP options field and we see what's all that stuff doing in the IP options field. That doesn't need to be there. I'm probably being hacked. Okay, is the conclusion. Unknown protocol, so bogus protocol numbers. IP packet fragments, so where you're putting fragmentation into packets that can completely mess up the receiving device to do something, some strange, open up a vulnerability on the receiving device. And sync fragments, where we're actually we've got our layer 3 TCP segments not properly formed. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about different types of attacks and sort of the stages of attacks. Let's take a look at what we can do about some of these things. So first of all, the first thing is what we're going to do with these screen options is we're going to put in place a system which says that if we're getting this situation, if we're getting packets that look like this, or if we're getting a stream of packets or a pattern of traffic that matches this particular criteria, then we want to drop that traffic. That's what we're going to do. So looking at packets or a stream of traffic that has certain characteristics about it. So that's our goal. But at the same time, what we don't want to do is we don't want to be dropping legitimate traffic, traffic that is actually quite normal on our network, traffic that we need to run our business with. So one of the things we kind of need to do to start with is we need to get a bit of a benchmark as to what is normal for our organisation. What should we expect as run-of-the-mill, day-to-day type traffic that is perfectly legitimate and normal in our organisation? So you want to get an idea of that. So, and you kind of get a feel for, well, you know, on a normal day we would get a certain amount of this type of traffic, but if we're being hacked, we'd probably get a big increase of that type of traffic, and that would represent a problem. So that's the kind of things that we're looking for. Legitimate applications and their behaviour, legitimate traffic patterns. And so so what we're saying is, if you don't understand what's legitimate, you might end up actually crashing your network, right? By putting in place options that drop in legitimate traffic. And obviously that's a big problem. So one of the things we can do to kind of help us get into setting up these screen options and getting an understanding of our network is we can come up with some guesstimations of what we think we should be, what we think our configuration should be, what we think our allowable parameters should be. We can go and configure those into our screen options, but we can use this alarm without drop statement in our configuration. And what that does is it says, well, if we exceed the parameters that we have set, we won't drop the traffic, but we will create an alarm which we can record to see or to alarm us when our particular thresholds have been exceeded. Now, if we go in and we look at those alarm thresholds and we say, well, there's nothing going on here, nothing to report, we will probably conclude that, well, our thresholds are certainly not too low for our day-to-day traffic. Maybe we could bring them back a little bit, or maybe they're about right. But if we look at these alarms and we find that every single day there's just stuff getting alarmed all over the place, we'll probably conclude that actually maybe our thresholds are too low. Maybe what we're doing is we're actually setting up our thresholds so that legitimate traffic is coming exceeding our thresholds. So we need to raise our thresholds up a little bit so that legitimate traffic is not caught within the thresholds that we have set. Because what I'm saying is there will be a certain parameters that represents legitimate traffic, and then there'll be a big jump in that type of traffic when a hacking event is taking place. Okay, so we can use this alarm without drop to kind of check the temperature a little bit, just check if we think we've got it right. So let's look at some of the attacks here. So this is the sweep and port scan attack. This is where we're getting ICMP packets or sync segments to various hosts within a predefined period of time, hoping that one replies once a host or port replies the target is uncovered. So on a normal day, how many ICMP packets would pass through a particular interface? So from a particular address, what we're saying is from one address, how many ICMP packets would you normally get in a period of time? Say in a period of time of here we go, this is an example here. We've got 1 million microseconds, there we go, or 1,000 microseconds. So in a period of time of say 500 microseconds, which is the default, how many pings would we get from one single address going through that particular zone from one single address? What would be normal? What would be abnormal? What would represent I am being hacked? Okay, that's the question. So what you do is you say, well, here's an example. Drop all ICMP traffic from a single source after greater than 10 ICMP packets set within a configurable time threshold. So drop all traffic from a source after 10 port scan within a configurable time threshold. Excuse me. So the default is 5,000 microseconds. 5,000 microseconds, which is not a very long time at all, in actual fact. So if I wanted to, say, let's make this capture more potential, or let's say I think that I wanted to make it more sensitive to an attack, make my system more sensitive to an attack. I would either increase the time or I would increase the number of packets in that time. Okay, that would capture, that would increase the possibility of packets being dropped due to hitting that threshold. If I wanted to decrease it, of course, I would decrease either of those parameters or both of those parameters. So if we are in fact being hacked and we've got someone out there scanning our network to try and find an IP address that may respond or a port that may respond, we're going to get a lot more than 10 packets set within a particular time frame, most likely. Okay, so what we're looking for is the difference between everyday activity and a hacking event taking place. So we can say, okay, this is the ICMP scan. Let's put this system in place, which says we're going to be looking for ICMP requests coming from a single address. If we exceed 10 of those in 500 microseconds, then we will drop traffic from that address. Okay, so this is our scan, this is our hacker there, sending lots and lots of pings or TCP sync segments coming through. Then this is our option here where we have got IP sweep threshold. We'll set up in microseconds there. And let's just go back and look at that. And the same goes for the port scanning here. So we'll set up how many microseconds do we think we should allow on a normal day for ICMP or sync segments from a single IP address. So we'll just set up a threshold there, and then if it goes over that, that will be dropped. Okay, so that's the defense against that particular attack. Let's look at this other attack, the IP options attack. So if we abuse the options field, then things like record route, timestamp, security, stream ID fields, these things can cause problems in network devices that we can avoid. So the defense is to track any packets that use any of these options, flag them as a reconnaissance attack, record the events and the corresponding ingress interface. So let's take a look at that there. This is the options field right here in the packet. So this is the configuration here. We've got record route option, timestamp, security, and stream option. This is configured under the edit security screen hierarchy. Okay, so we're setting up these screen options here. Operating system probes. So we're looking to trying to learn what operating system a particular target is using, and then we can exploit potential vulnerabilities in that operating system. And the defense is to detect what it really is malformed TCP segments, where the flags are set in such a way that with normal traffic, they are never set in that way. Like, for example, you've got both the sync and fin flag set at the same time. You've got the fin flag set without the ACT being set. We've got no flags at all. So these are really malformed TCP segments. What we're doing with that, the option is to go in and set these various screen options here under the TCP section there. So that will actually detect if any of these events occur, and we can drop those packets. Okay, then there's spoofing. We'll talk about spoofing. So invade networks by marking packets appear as if they come from a trusted source. That's certainly one of the things that a spoofing attack will do. So we're going to compare the source IP address of an incoming packet with the closest prefix match found in the forwarding table. So we're going to use our forwarding table here. If the prefix was not learned from the ingress interface of the incoming packet, consider the packet to be a spoofed attack. So think about what the forwarding table has in it. The forwarding table, which is really, think about it as a routing table. So if we look in our routing table, we would know what destination networks may be reachable through a certain interface, and if we get a packet that comes in which doesn't match any of those particular networks, then that would be spoofing. Okay, so this is an example over here where we've got a source address that is actually spoofed as part of the 168.10.10/24 range, which is an internal address. So we've got a spoofed source address there that arrives into here, and we can then use our forwarding table to detect the fact that that has come from a different interface. So it's come in on GE100, but in actual fact, those networks are associated with other interfaces, 001 and 000. So our forwarding table says, hang on, we got that source address on an interface where it would actually be impossible for a packet to have that source address, because those addresses are internal addresses. Therefore, that is spoofing. So we're using these screen options to go and investigate our forwarding table to sort out whether we've been spoofed or not. This is a IP source route option. So we hide the true source address. We're going to access restricted areas of the network by specifying a different route. There is a source route in the options field. There's a source route then. Source route option where you can put a different route, so you can actually just determine or specify the route that a packet takes. The defensive blocking impact of loose or strict source route option settings will detect those options as being set and record the defense there. So what we're saying is the packet has got a particular source route in the options field, and we're actually also using our routing table to sort out the fact that those packets actually can't come from that particular address. Okay, so there's a range of different things we're looking at here. There's different hacking attacks that we can go in and configure these options to sort out. Here's a DOS attack. So the goal of a DOS attack: mobilize the firewall router, mobilize the network behind the firewall. So as I said, basically swamp it with traffic so that it can't function. With a firewall and router, session table floods and sync attack proxy floods and network attacks. There's a range of different things that can happen on a network itself. So one attack is against the firewall directly, the other attack is against the network behind the firewall. There's a range of different attacks there. So let's look at this first one. This is the session table flood. We can have a sync flood, ICMP flood, UDP flood. So there's different types of traffic that can come through and flood our session table. The defense is to limit a source-based number of concurrent sessions and limit destination-based concurrent sessions. What we're saying is that if we've got a session which is from this address to that address, how many of those are we going to allow in our session table? What would be a normal amount of connections from a single point to another, to a single point? So from this address to another address, how many sessions would we normally have? So here am I, I'm a user, I'm connecting to a website. How many open sessions would I have to that particular website at the same time? Probably not that many, really. But if I was being hacked, I've got lots of sessions being set up from that hacking, from the source point of the hack. Okay, so I've got lots of sessions coming in. So we can limit the number of concurrent sessions based on either source, destination, or both. And we can just set up a threshold. The default is 128. So it will depend on the device. On the smaller branch devices, those sort of the smaller scale devices, you want to drop that because they just don't have the capacity, the session capacity, before the session table is filled up. So you want to drop that down because they have a much smaller session table, so they're more susceptible to that kind of attack. But also you expect that to have less traffic because they're a smaller device installed in a smaller situation. So we can set that up, set up a session limit. This is the source IP based number of sessions, destination IP based number of sessions. Okay, so this is the still looking at firewall and router device. Denial of service, sync ACK proxy flood, attacker sends a sync ACK pattern within seemingly normal TCP connection. So we've got session lookup, no session match, create a session table entry, and proxy sync ACK back to the source, and then we do a session lookup, no session match again, process first packet, sends sync back to the source, and the initial through-way handshake is complete. Send a login prompt, comes back with the sync, so the communication goes on. So this is a seemingly normal attack. What we end up doing here is we have the session there, which eventually fills up our session table with this sort of not properly formed session going on. So the defense is to be a proxy for TCP connection, thereby detecting the sync attack sessions and set a proxy threshold. Limit the number of concurrent TCP sessions from a single source. Okay, so we can go ahead and set that up there with a number of concurrent sessions from a single source. So again, it's a case of figuring out what would be normal, what would be an attack. This is the network attacks, which is a sync flood attack which inundates the target network resource with sync segments containing forward or spoof IP source addresses with non-existent or unreachable addresses. The target, force the target to respond with sync ACK and wait for a response. So it's never going to get a response. It's sort of waiting there in limbo for the session to form and never does. So because the destinations don't exist, sessions consume memory resources until they time out. But the problem is you end up filling up the memory before they time out and no legitimate sessions can ever be established. So we're kind of swamping our device with these sessions that are waiting to be formed but never are. The defense is just limit the number of these segments per second using a threshold-based proxy. So this is the screen option here. Okay, so what's happening is we end up with limiting how many we're going to be receiving, and we just end up blocking those. Okay, so these are our attack thresholds. We set up these alarm thresholds, attack thresholds, source, destination, and the maximum sessions hold time in the queue. So a lot of different things we can configure to guard against that particular type of attack. So a firewall really becomes a proxy for that. So in other words, the sessions are held and monitored within our firewall itself, and if we exceed our thresholds, we're going to be dropping those sessions. We can use a thing called a sync cookie, which protects and guards, protects targeted hosts and GeoScrew device from spoofed sync flood attacks, ensures a valid sync cookie response received prior to processing a new TCP connection, and a sync cookie is stateless, therefore it does not require a session, a policy, or a route lookup. So this is just something we can configure, this thing called a sync cookie, and it's very, very easy to configure. I've got an example of one that I've got configured in one of those files there that I can show you. And essentially, it's a way of validating the authenticity of a TCP session when it's being established. So essentially we have the sync comes in, we get the sync ACK, we do a session cookie lookup, no session match, cookie validated, process first packet, create a session, send a sync to the server, and then we get an acknowledgement which goes through, and then the data comes through. That then is acknowledged. So the following option is under the edit security flow, which is sync flood protection mode, sync cookie. Essentially what you're going to do is you're going to put all these things in place, right? You're going to put them all in place. You're going to figure out what your thresholds are, and you're going to go ahead and put them all in place. Alright, so we've got these ICMP and UDP floods. So the idea is to overload the target with these pings, causing it to stop responding to valid traffic, and again set a threshold on the number of requests and drop anything that goes over that limit. Same goes for UDP. You just set a threshold. So what's normal and what is a hacking event? Here we go. This is our ICMP threshold set up there, and we'll do exactly the same for our UDP. Set up the threshold. Okay, this is a LAN attack. Attacker sends a combined attack sync attack with an IP spoofing attack. Sends spoofed sync packet containing the IP address of the target as both the source and destination address, known as a LAN attack. The defense combines elements of sync flood defense and IP spoofing rejection. Okay, so that's just certain operating systems just pretty much collapse if if you do that. And exit. So we're essentially putting in the IDS option PCP LAN. There it is. And PC-based operating system DOS attacks. So we've got ping of death, teardrop and WinU, and the defense has detected these oversized and irregular ping packets. As I said, a ping is a really small packet normally because it's got no data in it. And you can tell if it's a ping packet by the protocol that's set in it. So if you get a really big one, you think, okay, something's wrong here. Teardrop detect discrepancy of a fragmented packet and drop it. And WinUke is to detect the URG flag setting within a packet and unset it. So there's the mitigation there, ping clear, and teardrop and WinUke. So like I said, you're going to set all these things. Okay, ICMP abnormalities. The attack is to use ICMP packets to attack hosts, networks, or both. And once targets are defined to launch the attack, and the defense is to detect fragmentation of an ICMP packet. Well, again, why would it be fragmented, right? Why do you fragment a packet? Well, the reason you might fragment a packet is because the packet is too big to be transmitted without fragmenting. In other words, it exceeds the maximum transmission unit. Therefore, you might have to fragment it. But a ping is a really small packet. It's never going to exceed the MTU, so why would you ever have to fragment it? You wouldn't. If you find a fragmented ping, something's wrong. So you detect them, you block them, and you simply set up a length, a maximum length. So there it is there. So if they're fragmented, we're dropping it. If they exceed our length, maximum length, we are dropping it as well. There it is there. Protocol number 1. Okay, so IP packet fragments is another attack where you abuse the legitimacy of packet fragmentation, crash the system by producing malicious packets resulting from IP packet reassembly. So in other words, you create these fragments, but the fragments don't join up together properly. In other words, they can never be reassembled because the fragment sort of start and end bits are all messed up. So you end up crashing the target. Then there's bad IP options attack. So abusing the IP options field. The defense is block IP packet fragments or packets with incorrectly formatted options. And that's it there. The IP block frag and the IP bad option. Unknown protocol. So use a protocol type field by setting it to 137 or greater. Otherwise it doesn't exist. Produce malicious packets. The defense is to detect and block those. So that's the configuration option there. IP unknown protocol. Sync fragments. Still abusing the legitimacy of packet fragmentation. That there, that's our fragment offset. And it's our defense. Okay, so they are all the various sort of things we can configure. Applying and monitoring. So first of all, we go ahead and create screen options, and then they are applied to a zone. So this is the configuration here on the security screen, IDS options. And then we put all of the various options under there. I'll give you an example of this shortly. And then we go ahead and apply them to a zone. Just go into whatever. Usually, you definitely put it in your internet zone. You may apply to these other zones. Okay. So let's look at this case study here, protecting the private zone. So we want to use screen options to protect the perimeter zone from ICMP abnormalities, ICMP floods, and session table floods. This is our configuration under security. We've got screen, ODS option, protector, ICMP, got a fragment, large, and we've got a flooding threshold, and we've got a session limit. Source IP based, we've got a session limit of 50. So this is our public zone. This is where we're actually applying it to our zone. Just that's it there, screen protector. That's it. This is us monitoring it, where we can see if we've got any large packets, etc. through there. Use the show security screen range option, screen range command. We can see a particular screen option, the details of what's traffic, what is configured, and we can log those events as well using trace options. Put trace options on there and log it as well. Okay, we're going to look at an example of this shortly. So we looked at the meaning of screen options, looked at some of the attacks and the defenses, the advantages of screen options, and looked at how to configure it, and looked at how to monitor it. Okay, so what is the purpose of screen options? What do they do? They are there to detect, and prevent hacking, right? So hacking, so an attack. Right, so they're there to detect and prevent an attack.
Terminals and servers.
Yeah, against firewalls and against networks and against devices on the networks themselves. So what type of options are available? There's many options really. We looked at a whole lot of them. But there's three categories. There's the reconnaissance type stuff, where there's the scanning, port scanning, and an IP address scanning. So we can guard against the reconnaissance. We can guard against spoofing with that as well. We can also guard against denial of service attacks. So there's a whole range of different things there that can sort of occur, and also against malformed packets that are designed to target particular operating systems. Where do we? What was the goal of a DOS attack? What's the goal? What is the hacker trying to do? We have a DOS attack. What's the hacker trying to do? If someone is launching a DOS attack on us,
Overload your access to it.
Yeah, what they're trying to do is overwhelm our network with data so that it becomes non-functional. So it essentially becomes overwhelmed with the information or with the DOS attack, so that it cannot process legitimate traffic. Where do we apply screen options? It's under the security screen stanza. So let's just let's have a look at screen options. So what I'm going to do is we'll take a look at a firewall here. Let's just drop that down, open this up. Okay, so just log in here. So we want to look at screen, and oops, we want to see. Let's have a look at let's look at our stats to see what we've got in there. Oh, need to know. Let's do zone. let's do untrust. Okay, so this is, we've got screen options configured. What problems have we seen? Well, we've seen this TCP sync flood. We've had 511 of them. We've had some spoofing, some fragment problems, 22 ICMP large packets. So these are hacking attempts here, right? Now, why would I have an ICMP large packet? There's no reason for it. Source session limit. So we've exceeded our limit a fair bit. We've exceeded our IP. What's this one here? Our fragment. There we are. We've got some fragmenting problems there that we've exceeded our limits that we've set. So we have captured and detected a few things that are going on there. Let's take a look at our IDS and untrust screen. So this is what we've got enabled. We've got our flood threshold set to 500. We've got our WinNuke is enabled, teardrops enabled. These TCP sync flood attacks, they're all enabled. There's our thresholds that we've set, and all these other things are enabled. And it's our source limit threshold set at 50. Okay, so this is what we've got set. This is what's running on this particular firewall. We're going to go and take a look at where that is, where that's configured. We're going to take a look at that. Security screen. Okay, so this is the configuration here. IDS option, we've just called that untrust screen. That's just what I've called it. And this is the configurations here. So we've got ICMP, we've got IP, we've got TCP, LAN, WinNuke. We've got our sessions there, and we've got trace options. So if I was to go look at my my log file called screen, let's go and take a look at it. Let's do a exit. Let's do a show log screen. Okay, so this is my my log here, which kind of shows me everything that's going on within my screen options. What are we doing here? Lots of things, actually. Running up to 2%. So we've got a lot going on there. Probably a bit too much going on, to be honest, to actually have a good look at. But this is absolutely everything is being recorded here in this particular log file. Yeah, probably a bit too much to be looking. So we've got, what have we got here? We've got a ping of death. There we go. We've got that happening there. We've got some bad options coming through. So a few unknown protocols. Yeah, quite a lot of information in there. We have to be looking for something specific, really. There we go. This was
Okay, so basically, yeah, a lot of information in there in that log. Pretty much the thing that we really want to have a look at was the fact, what have we got set, so we can look at, this is what's actually in an operation, that's what's working. And if we can also go and take a look at our stats for that, see what exactly has been happening. Okay, so that's it. That's screen options to protect against deliberate hacking. What we'll do at this point is we will take a break, and then we'll move on to our next topic.